Activity 92, what you do with this problem is you take each account and fill it into the adjusted trial balance. So I've done 3 for you. Cash is $9,000. I'll do an easy one. It has a debit balance, so I put it over here. Accounts payable is a liability. It has a credit balance, so I put it over here. And sales revenue, right here, sales revenue has a credit balance, is $20,000. It has a credit balance, so it goes over here. Fill the entire thing, and here's the challenging part, folks. Get the debits equal to the credits. Now, for you, if you're advanced, what I want you to do is I want you to do it in order. So, your assets and the contra asset all go here. Your liabilities and stockholders' equity all go here. And your revenues and expenses all go here. That's if you really want to challenge. But record each item and whether it's a debit and credit, and then show that they balance. And just go through what they are and what the balance is. Accounts receivable, that's what is that? An asset, and it has a debit or credit balance. Let's just go through each one. We'll say if it's an asset or liability, stock, whatever, and what the balance is. So accounts receivable is an asset and it has what? A debit balance. Accounts payable is what? What kind of account? Liability, and it has a credit balance. Accumulated depreciation, what kind of account is that? Contra asset, and what kind of balance does it have? A credit account. Additional paid-in capital. We haven't seen this in this chapter, but we know it's a stockholders' equity account. And what kind of balance does a stockholders' equity account have? Credit. Cash, a very easy one. Cash, what kind of account? Asset, and that is a debit account. Common stock. What kind of account? Stockholders' equity, and that's a debit or a credit? Credit. Cost of goods sold, what kind of account? Asset, think again. It's an expense. And what kind of balance does it have? A debit balance. Dividends, what kind of account is that? It's negative stockholders' equity. And that's a debit account. Equipment, what kind of account is that? Asset, and it has a debit account. Loss on sale of equipment. I mentioned this twice. What kind of account is that? It's really a loss, but you could say it's like an expense. What kind of balance will it have? Debit balance. Interest expense, that is an expense account, and that is debit or credit? Debit. Inventory, what kind of account is that? Asset, and it has what kind of a balance? Debit balance. Note payable. What kind of account? Liability, and that is an asset. That's a debit or a credit? Credit. Good. Retained earnings, beginning. What kind of account is that? Stockholders' equity, and what kind of balance does it have? Credit balance. Sales revenue. What kind of account is that? Revenue account. And what kind of balance does it have? Credit. Supply expense. Debit or credit? Well, it's an expense, right? Debit or credit balance? Debit balance. Gotta know this cold. Everything we've done, the only thing we saw here that might be a little challenging is loss on sale of equipment. Everything else, study this until you know it. Like print this page out and sleep with it under your head or something. Whatever you have to do, right? When you go out drinking tomorrow night, just look at it so you pass out over the book. Now let's go through the different assets that we have here. One asset we started go in order of liquidity. So order of liquidity would say that the next thing is going to be accounts payable. Oops, sorry, wrong line. Accounts receivable, I'm sorry. And accounts receivable has a debit balance of $18,000. Another current asset is inventory. The balance of inventory is $5,000. I think we've got all the current assets now. Yes, we do. So the next thing to go to is non-current assets. And the big non-current asset here is equipment. And equipment has a debit balance of $22,000. And then we have accumulated depreciation, which is a contra asset. Remember that. And that is a $3,000 credit, because accumulated depreciation offsets the asset. Now let's do liabilities. I have accounts payable. Do you see any other liabilities here? With notes payable, right? Notes payable is a credit of $4,100. Any other liabilities? Okay, let's move on now to stockholders' equity. One stockholders' equity account, the first one we always see is common stock. Common stock is $5,000. Then I have additional paid-in capital on common stock. And there it is. This is how we see it in the balance sheet, right? So additional paid-in capital is $31,000. Any other stockholders' equity accounts? Retained earnings. Retained earnings in this case is $4,000 credit. Dividends. Dividends has what kind of balance, my friends? Debit balance of $2,000. Excellent. Are there any other revenue accounts besides sales revenue? And by the way, if you're doing this in the real world, then when you want to, like, or on a test, you check them off as you put them on the list, you know, so you make sure you got them all. Next of all, I got my expenses. So one expense I've got, the big one, is cost of goods sold. Cost of goods sold in this case is $11,000. The next one is supplies expense, $1,200. Next one is interest expense, $100. And finally, loss on sale of equipment, $5,800. And now we're going to do our math, and you'll have to I'm going to do it on my little calculator here. The debits, I'm going to add them up and make sure they add. 9,000 plus 8. Actually, I can do this pretty cool. I can avoid the thousands. And I could just go 9 plus 18 plus 5 plus 22 plus 2 plus 11 plus 1.2 plus 0.1 plus 5,800 equals not a minus 5,800. Plus 5.8 equals 74.1. And on the right side, 3 plus 7 plus 4.1 plus 5 plus 31 is 74,100 on the right side. So now you know something you need to study. I'm not telling you this is going to be on the test, but you got to know this. If you can't do this, then you're not going to know which accounts to debit and credit, right? If you have an adjusted trial balance to do, how are you going to do it? Let's skip activity 93.